So now that we are able to interact with the chart panel, it would be nice to see our stats. So in this part of the tool, we are gonna calculate our stats based on the equipment that we have equipped at the moment. The way I'm going to do it is not going to be very fancy, and it might not look very nice, but it's going to show the functionality so that you can take it to something that looks nicer. So I'm going to do something very simple with an image and a text box, and it's just going to be plain text on an image. But as I said, you might want to use a better image and make it look nicer and move the text around so it looks better. But this is going to demonstrate how you can actually take all the equipment and calculate the stats and give these stats to the player. And our player is going to have some base stats, and the equipment is going to add on to those base stats as we equip the items, and remove from those base stats when we de-equip the items. So first of all, we need to add our image for showing our stats on. So underneath the chart panel holder, we can just right click, go to UI and select an image. And this image is basically going to be our stats. So we can just click on it, press F2 and call it stats. As the image, I'm simply going to use the background of the inventory. I'm just going to scroll down here and find the inventory. And this is going to be the exact the image that I'm going to use. So right now we can't see it, and the reason we can't see it is because our char panel holder here has a 0 alpha. Just show it here so we can see where we're moving stuff. If we click on the stats, we can see the position C is 0, but the char panel holder's position is -140, so might as well put that one on 0 as well, so we can see everything on the same in the same space. So let's take the stats here and move them right next to our chart panel. I'm not gonna line it up very nicely, just about like this. And you can make it larger or smaller if you want to, that's up to you. I'm not gonna make it scale or anything, I'm just gonna write the text plain on it. So I'm gonna right click on the stats and I'm gonna say UI and I'm gonna say text. And this text is gonna be the text that is gonna write the stats, so we might as well just write something right now. We can write strength, we can write stamina, we can write intellect, and then we can write agility. So the point is that this is just a placeholder because we're going to change it from our script, but it's going to give you an idea of how it's actually going to look when you're going to write it. So you can make this one the same size as your stats background, and then you can take the anchor point and put it in the top left corner on the text, and you can take the pivot point as well and put it in the top left corner, just to do that. Right now we can't see the text, and that's because the color is black, so we can select the black color and make it white so we can see it better. And then you can move this in a little so the text has a little gap between the edges of this one. Let's try to do like this. There we go. Actually, if we would put the text to stretch, I think like this one should stretch with the parent if we would change anything, I think. Yeah, then it stretches with the parent. So you might as well put the anchor maybe a stretch. So we can add some stats here later, 10 for example, strength and so on. We're going to do that from our script. So that's basically it for setting up the background or the item that is going to show our stats. Then next thing we need to do is to jump into our player and go to the player script here. Here we go. So up here we are going to need to add some more text. We already have our helper text. We're going to make it one more public text, and we're going to call this stats text. So our stats text needs to be updated with the player stats. And our player is going to have 2 pairs of stats. I think it's easier for us if we save it in variables instead of just writing it directly down in our function that's going to write into this tooltip. So we're going to add 2 pairs of stats. We're going to add stats that is base stats and stats that is stats with added equipment on it. So we're going to make an intellect private. Actually, let's make them public. public integer base intellect, and public integer base agility, public integer base strength, keep saying intellect, public integer base stamina. Okay, and then we're gonna have the exact same set of private variables here, and they're not gonna be base, they're just gonna be intellect, and it's gonna be agility, and we're gonna have strength, and we're gonna have our base stamina as well. So these are the base stats the player has when he's naked, and these are the stats with the base stats added to it. So when we take our clothes on, our equipment on, then these are gonna be increased. So down here in bottom here, we need to add a new function, and this function should be called set stats. So we're gonna say public void set stats, and we're going to say integer agility, integer strength, integer stamina, and integer intellect. Okay, so now we just created a function to set the stats, and this function should take in all these stats here so we can calculate them. So from our from our char panel, we will, every time we equip something new, we will set stats on the player, so we tell the player how much agility, strength, stamina, and intellect we have right now. So this dot agility equals agility, this one, plus base agility. So the agility up here, because I say this dot agility, I'm breaking my tongue here, this dot agility is equal to the agility we get in here in set stats, which is calculated from the items we are carrying at the moment, plus our base agility, and the same with the others. Plus base strength, and this dot stamina equals stamina plus base stamina, and the last one with intellect. Okay, so now we have just calculated all our stats. The next thing we need to do is to set the text outside in our game here. This text here needs to be set so we can see our stats as they increase or decrease. And we can do that by saying stats text equals string dot format stamina new line strength and new line intellect and number 2 and new line and agility. And the first one we need to put in on this spot is the stamina, so we're gonna write stamina, this dot stamina, comma, next one we need to put in is this dot strength and this dot intellect and this dot agility. Okay, so we are creating a string where we say stamina equals stamina here, strength equals strength, and so on. So this is going to be to a string that we're going to write in our on our character panel so we can see our stats. We also need to be able to reach this from our from our character panel. So we can either find the player every time we equip an item and calculate the stats, or we can just make the player into a singleton so that we can reach him easily without doing game object and find. So we can make a private static, not partial, but private static player called instance, and then we're going to refactor this one and do the exact same thing as we usually do when we create a singleton. If instance equals null, then we are going to find our player and say instance equals game object that find object of type player, because I guess we're only going to have one player in our game. And then we're going to return our instance here. So now we can jump to our character panel, and in here we can make a new function, public void calculate stats, calc stats. And now it's going to be coming in handy that we actually made this array here of all our slots, because we're going to run through it and add all the stats we have equipped. So we're going to make local variables here, agility equals 0, and strength equals 0, integer stamina equals 0, and what did I forget, intellect equals 0. There we go. So now I have made all these 4 variables here, and I'm going to add up the equipment stats to these so that I can send this on to my player so he gets these stats. So for each slot in equipment slots, wasn't that what it's called? There we go. So for each slot inside equipment slots, we're going to say if our slot is empty. So if it isn't empty, by making it negative here, so if the slot isn't empty, then we need to take the stats from that that item in that slot and add it to these variables up here so that we can move it on to our player later. So we run through all our items. So let's say we have equipped all items here. We run through each and every one of them, and we take the strength, the stamina, and the intellect out, or we don't take it out, but we take the numbers and we add it to these, and then we send it on to the player so he knows that how much intellect and strength he has. So we're gonna say equipment, if I can spell E equals slot.current item, and we're gonna cast this to an equipment because they are all of a type equipment. Our weapons is equipment, all our equipment is equipment, so we can just take this here. And then we're gonna say agility plus equals e.agility, and so on. We can just paste this actually. So we can take strength here, and we're going to take stamina down here, and we're going to take intellect down here, and then we can basically replace the like this. Okay, so now we are taking the equipment, we're running through all our slots. We find a slot with something in it, we take the equipment out of it, and we check, well, how much agility do you have, how much strength do you have, stamina do you have, and how much intellect do you have. When we have that, we put it over in the local variables over here, and when we're done running through all of them, we say player.instance that sets stats, agility, strength, stamina, and intellect. So then we pass it on to the player. If I could spell intellect. There we go. So then we pass it on to the player here. Let's save this. So now we need to call this function all the relevant places. So first of all, we need to call it inside equip item. Let's find equip item here. When we're done equipping an item, we need to call calculate stats. Well, where else do we need to find it? So later when we have added our load and our save function, we of course also need to do it when we load and save our inventory. But that's not relevant right now. So for now, let's call it here, and then we'll see if it works. Let's save this and jump back into Unity. If I could click on the correct Unity here. There we go. Let's see what happens. Did I remember to set our stuff? If we click on our player and see misses stat text, so take the stats text and move it onto your player. If we could do that, there we go. So he has the text on him. See what happens. Let's try to equip something, and I equipped this one, and the player got 4 stamina, 6 strength, 2 intellect, and 5, and that's what this object is giving. But we actually need to do one more thing, because the player needs its base stats, of course. So we need to go to the player, and we need to go to player script, and inside the start function here we need to say set stat, not set stat, was it? What was it called? This one down here. It was set stats. Set stats, and we need to do 0 all the way down. There we go. So now we're going to set the stats with 0, so we only print out our base stats. So right now you might be wondering, why doesn't my tooltip work and everything? Well, the reason the tooltip doesn't work is because we are hiding this at the beginning. And I forgot to save, I think. Well, actually I didn't forget to save, I just forgot to set the base stats. So if we click on the player, you'll see that he has 0 in all stats, so I'm just going to get 10, 13, 15, and 8. So now he has some stats. And just for good measure, let's click on the chart panel holder and press 0 here so we can't see it. And let's open it up, and you'll see that we have all our base stats here now. And whenever I equip some items, these stats are increased, as you can see. So every time I take some items on, I get better stats, of course. And right now I'm very lucky getting some different items. If I take an item off, the stats doesn't decrease yet. So we also need to make sure that whenever I de-equip an item here, the stats should be reduced as well. And I can see I'm missing a space between intellect and the number it has, because right now we can actually just equip all our items and then I can equip them again, but the stats, it looks like they don't persist. As you can see, they're recalculated every time I do it, but right now when we take it off, we also want to show the stats right away, so we don't need to equip something else before the stats are updated. So let's fix that as the first thing. So let's check out what's wrong. I think it's some of the same functionality or the same error as we had earlier when we wanted to check to equip our shield and so on. Because right now inside our equip item, under equip item, we are calling calculate stats. And this one is not called every time we remove something and every time we move something with the mouse. So basically we need to remove this, because we need to do it somewhere else, I think. We need to do it inside swap items. So if we go to definition here, so in here, down here, we could basically just say, well, every time we move something around, we need to recalculate our stats. But that's kind of a waste, because then if you move 2 health potions around, or 2 mana potion and health potion around, you'll recalculate your stats, and there's no point in recalculating your stats unless you just move something to or from the character panel. So I could say down here, character panel dot instance dot calculate stats, like this. So if I would do this and just save, well, then it would work. It should calculate my stats no matter what. If I do like this, if I equip a shield, it calculates my stat, and if I take that shield off and put it back in here, it calculates my stats back. But actually, theoretically, it also calculates my stat when I take this health potion, mana potion, and put it here. It will also recalculate stats, but there is no new items on it, so it doesn't react. But it still runs through all my equipment and calculates the stats when I do like this every single time. and there's no point in doing that. So instead of doing that, we would need to check if we moved something from or to the character panel. So we can make a bool called calc_stats equals from the transform.parent, if that is equal to character panel that instance the transform, or to the transform.parent is equal to character panel that instance the transform. So this boolean is true if the from slot we're moving from parent is the character panel, or if the slot we're moving to is the parent is the character panel. So if we are moving from an equipment slot or to an equipment slot, well then then we need to calculate our stats. So this one is true. So we can just do if calc stat. See, where do we have it? We have it here. So we need to move one scope in. There we go. So if calculate stats, well, then we need to calculate stats. So let's save this and check if it still works, everything. Well, yes. And we equipped our boots. We just gained some stats from those boots. And if we decrypt them, we lose the stats again. And now it doesn't calculate the stats when we move around up here as it did before. Yes. So that is the functionality for calculating stats and adding stats to the player. Then you can use those stats for attacking or something, or healing, or whatever you want to do. So there's one more thing we need to make sure that works, and we're going to do that in the next part. So I'm going to wrap this one right now, but in the next part we need to look at the loading and the saving function, because right now we are not loading and saving this inventory. It doesn't help when we if we put some things in. It might also get some exceptions if we do like this and save, and we get some exceptions here. So we need to fix those, and we're going to do that in the next part.